into it, go to projects.100xdevs.com and open SQL, the track that we have created for today. It's a very beginner friendly track. I've tried to keep it slow. What we will learn today will specifically be divided into two parts. The simple stuff, which will be basic differences between SQL and NoSQL, why SQL databases are better, how to create your own Postgres database, and how to do CRUD on a Postgres database. How can you put data, remove data, update data? Advanced things we will learn would be what is this thing called relationships in an SQL database, something called joins and transactions. This thing that we discussed a little bit during the Paytm project, but something we will learn today as well. Okay, how do you do transactions in an SQL database? When do you need transactions in an SQL database? All right, let's kick things off. First thing we're discussing is the types of databases that exists. There are many different categories of databases. NoSQL databases is something we have done until now. This includes MongoDB, a bunch of other famous NoSQL databases, the property of which is they store data in a schema-less fashion. Extremely lean and fast way to store data. Why do I say fast? I mean you can hit the ground running ekdam se. This is why it is always introduced as the first project in any beginner friendly MERN course, because it's much easier to understand a NoSQL database compared to an SQL database. If you look at it, the final schema or how your data looks something like this, and it is schema-less, which basically means you can put whatever you want here. It can be a more complicated object. It can have arrays in there. This row can have a different schema. This row can have a different schema. It's very lean. Put whatever you want there, change whatever you want to put whatever at any point of your application. Cool. Great to get things off the ground. Not great in the longer term. We will see when. We will see why. Second, graph databases. These are another category of databases that I think were introduced at Facebook. I could be wrong. They basically store data like this. Okay, a person is a friend of this other person in the form of a graph. And this is specifically useful for cases where relationships are super important. How is data related to each other? For example, a social network website is a very good example of where you want this person is following this person has X followers, so on and so forth. So for a social media application, it makes a lot of sense to store data, or at least the relationships, in a graph database. We don't have to go into the depths of it. The most popular one, this one I used in a few projects at Goldman as well, is Neo4j, and today it has also become popular for some AI applications. Happy to discuss at the end of the class. Vector databases suddenly popped up and are in a lot of catching a lot of heat today. A lot of vector database companies are raising a lot of money because they let you build. They're very useful for AI applications. They store data in the form of vectors. I don't know how many of you have tried a little bit of AI right now, but these large language models, if you've used OpenAI, some of you might have heard of this thing called embeddings, which basically means if you take some text as an input, it gives you out a vector as an output, basically a bunch of numbers, 0.8, 0.3, 0.1, so on and so forth. So all text can be converted into some vectors, which you can store in a vector database. Okay, bhai, this text and this vector, put it in there. And then if you have some different text, you can put it in there and you can populate this vector database. And this is useful for, if you might have heard of applications like, talk to a PDF. You upload a PDF and then you can talk to it. They heavily rely on vector databases as your primary store. Why? Happy to discuss later, slightly off topic, but basically they let you do something called similarity search. If I store a lot of text in here, let's say I store my complete physics book in this vector database, page by page, then I can quickly search which topic discusses Newton's first law of motion. That's one of the use case, probably the biggest use cases that vector databases let you do. But again, off topic, not happy to discuss at the end of the class. These two are basically very popular today thanks to AI applications. For full stack applications though, SQL is prime, at least now, probably for a while. SQL databases store data in the form of rows. Most full stack applications will use this and they are very strict. I will discuss what strictness means here, but you store data like this in the form of rows. Okay, I have a users table or a customers table, which has a customer ID, first name, last name, phone, country. These are all numbers, strings, booleans. You usually don't store JSON in here. You don't store an array in here. There are ways to do it, but in SQL, you don't do it. You have a simple plain row where each of these is like a string or a number. And it's very strict. What strictness means, I will come to when we reach the SQL slide. But because of that strictness, it is preferred much more in most full stack applications compared to MongoDB, where it's good to get things off the ground, but not the best database to use in the long term. All right. 4 categories of databases we've discussed. There are a few more categories, but the popular ones today are these 4. What are we learning? SQL. But before that, why not NoSQL? What's the problem with NoSQL databases? You might have used MongoDB. Its schemaless properties makes it ideal for bootstrapping your project fast. By bootstrapping, I mean creating a project very quickly. If you have a hackathon project, use MongoDB. But as your application grows, this property makes it very easy for data to get corrupted. What do I mean when I say corrupted? What is schemaless? Different rows can have different schemas. So if you have a users table where, let's say, you're storing this user ID, this has balance this much. This comes from the Paytm project. If you remember, okay, this was one of the tables we had there. Okay, this user has 5,800 rupees. Another user has 3,000 rupees, so on and so forth. It might happen, or at least it can happen, okay, you can store something like this by mistake in MongoDB. Okay, rather than balance, you store amount balance. The key is different. Or you store balance as a string by mistake. Your backend application could have a bug in there. Whatever the reason might be, you might be able to put corrupted data in MongoDB. Why? Because MongoDB is schemaless. They're like, I don't care, put whatever you want. Every row can have different schema. I don't care. This is as good as it is for a lot of use cases. It helps you bootstrap your project fast. You can put whatever you want. In the long term, if your backend application has a bug, your data can get corrupted, which is why you don't want to use MongoDB in the long term. You can run into cases like these. Problems can lead to inconsistent databases, can cause runtime errors. What do I mean by this? I mean when you are putting the data in the database, you might be like, good, rather than storing balance, you have stored amount balance. When the user begins to read their balance, you will see an error. Okay, you were expecting balance from the database, you did not get. So you will face a bunch of runtime errors. A lot of these errors will seep into your database, which is something you don't want. It's too flexible for an app that needs strictness. And generally, you want strictness in your application, as it's basically the same as the difference between JavaScript and TypeScript. You don't need TypeScript, but it adds strictness to your code base that reduces the number of runtime errors. Pretty much the same thing. What are the upsides of this? Lets you move very fast, can change schema very easily. All right. One quick call out here. Okay, you might feel that Mongoose, the library, lets you add strictness. We defined the schema over there, but that strictness is present only at the Node.js level. Your Node.js app will not be able to put erroneous data in. But some admin can go into MongoDB Compass and put it. You might have a bug in your application where you define the schema incorrectly, so on and so forth. So you can still put in erroneous data. Your database isn't restricting bad schema to come in. You want your database should be resilient enough. Even if you try to put bad data in, even if you try to put amount balance or a string over here, your database rejects it right then and there. It should not allow these corruptions to seep into your database. SQL lets you do that. Let's move on to the next slide. SQL databases, no thank you. SQL databases have strict schema. They require you to define your schema up front. This part is very important. Whenever you have an SQL application, an SQL database, you will have to define your schema upfront. What is schema will come to, but basically the shape of your application upfront. You will have to put in the data that follows that schema. You cannot put any random data in there, and update the schema as your application changes. For example, your application might grow, right? Initially, you might have only balance. Eventually, you might have HDFC Bank balance. Your application can grow, your users can grow, your application can change. So your schema should be allowed to be changed, but you have to define it upfront. If your application has a change, let's say you were building Paytm and suddenly you added UPI support, so your database needs to change. You need to perform a migration, which basically means tell your database कि भाई from now onwards you have another column called HDFC balance, and then once you put that update in there is when you can put more data. These are the 3 steps that you usually follow in a SQL application. So what's the life cycle of a general SQL application? Let me quickly share my iPad here, if it lets me. Oh, I don't trust this machine. There we go. If you have an SQL database, you will first bring it up, which means you will buy an SQL database similar to mongodb.com. You bought the MongoDB database, or you will start it locally. Bring up your DB. Number 2, you will tell the schema. You will tell the database, okay, bro, there is a users table. It needs to have a username key and a password key, and only this data should be allowed in. Then your application is able to put data inside. A new user signed up, so on and so forth. And lastly, if your application grows, you update schema. Okay, ठीक है जी. Now we also support phone numbers. Your schema gets updated. All existing rows get like a null phone number for now. And then whenever a user comes and puts in the phone number, you can now put in not just their first name, last name, but also the phone number in there. This is the general life cycle of any SQL application. The extra thing here compared to MongoDB is whenever schema is changing, you need to tell the server कि हाँ भाई schema has changed. You need to tell the database कि schema has changed. Data shape will now look like this. So there are 4 steps to running an SQL application. Not connecting to Node.js, just running it and putting in data. Assuming you're not yet putting in data using Node.js. You can put data in an SQL application, in an SQL database using a Node.js application, using a Java application, using a Golang application, using the terminal also. Forgetting that we are now dealing with backend applications. Just if you want to put data, even with the terminal, there are 4 steps: running the database, using a library that lets you connect to the database and put in the data, creating the schema, the tables, this is the shape of my data, and then running queries to actually put data in, get data, so on and so forth. Let's look at all 4 of these steps one by one. Let's bootstrap a simple SQL database and try to interact with it in the next step. First step, creating a database. There are 2 ways. I would urge you to take 5 minutes and try to either get a free one on NeonDB. The steps are given here. Just go to neon.tech, sign up and create a fresh database. Or if you have Docker locally, you can run these commands to start Postgres. I am going to run it locally. You can do whatever you want, but in the next 5 minutes, if you can, try to get your hands on a string like this, which you will get either in the Neon database dashboard after you create your database. If you're not able to do that for whatever reason, this is free. You don't need a credit card, I think. So you should be able to just do it unless we spam it and they're not able to handle it. I think they'll be able to. If not, use Docker to run it locally. I am going to run it locally. This is the command that you need to run. This will start Postgres for you. Take 4 more minutes now. I'm going to do the same. Let me run it using Docker locally. Docker run, give it a name, give it an environment variable. Okay, this is my password for my SQL database. Run it in detached mode, add a port mapping, and then give it a name. We will discuss all of this when we reach Docker. If you don't understand it, this is fine. But if you do know it, run it locally. You can also run it natively, like install Postgres natively. That works as well. That might take a lot of time, which is why I'm asking you to do either this or this and have it handy in the next 4 minutes. All right. Until then, I'm going to open chat if someone has any questions until this point. Cool. In case of migration will happen to the previous row, not having the values for new column added. Yes. So whenever you're doing a migration, and let's say you add a phone number field, you have to do one of two things. Either this field can be null, which means users can not have phone numbers. If they want, they can put it. If not, that's fine. Or you give it a default value. Okay, bhai, everyone's number is going to be 0000000. So depending on your use case, for example, when you're introducing phone numbers to your database, of course, your existing users have not put it in there. So, that row will have to be nullable, and a row can be nullable. Doesn't necessarily have to have a value in there. So it'll just have a null value for those users. How can I define a schema for product that doesn't exist and has a fixed number of features? Some products have 10 features, others have 20. Doesn't have fixed number of features. So this question I understand in two ways. One, you don't know the application yet. If you don't know the application yet, okay, how it will grow, then you can't do much. As your application grows, you change your schema. Second is, it seems like you're saying okay, more and more features can get added. Anytime a feature is added, your database changes a certain way. So here, your schema itself would be a table. If I understand your question correctly, I probably don't. But yeah, I think if your question was in the first category, if I don't know how my application will grow, then as it grows, you update your database. All right, 2 more minutes. NeonDB got crashed. Fucking A. Run it locally, guys. Do you guys know even our database provider is NeonTech? So like this website also uses NeonTech as fucking A. It's not. You guys weren't wrong. Okay, we will wait. It's fine. I'll wait. I think just the sign up page is down. Of course, their application isn't down. Else a bunch of websites would be down there, a database provider. Avian is another one. Yes, this might be it. But again, Avian Postgres. There you go. Try this, avian.io. There's also elephant something, elephant DB. There are a bunch of them. We will wait till 30, so 7:30. And we will proceed after that. If you don't have it, you can watch along, I guess, or just try to grab one until then. Try Avian. Again, start with a free plan, create a small instance. We can go from there. But even if you don't have it, we'll be running some very simple commands. So you can just run them later on. Or I can throw in a database in chat, but then, everyone will be using it. So its schema will look weird. It'll work for some, not work for some. So just take your time and try to grab one. We'll do a poll at 58 and see how many people are able to get it. 28, whatever. Someone said, but we can use libraries like Zod to get rid of schema issues, right? You can have a very strict backend and make sure, even if your database is schemaless, your backend has very strict checks to make sure only a certain schema goes in. You are not wrong, but devs are dumb. They can make mistakes here. And it is fine. Backend will have bugs, but the problem is when those bugs persist in a database. You want your database itself rejects something. You want Zod to be running here. Okay, bhai, database will reject anything that's bad. You want type checking here, which is why you can have the most strict checks in your backend. That is one way to make your database strict, but the ideal way is your database rejects bad things. Now you can have a bad backend as well. Your database will begin to reject requests that don't follow a certain schema. All right. Make us install Docker and then that will be good. So installing Docker locally, even though, yeah, you can try that actually, you're not wrong. Go here, install Docker engine, install for Linux, Mac, Windows. It doesn't take more than 2 minutes to do it. So yeah, do this and then, run Docker GUI. I have it running here, as you can see. And then just run this command in the terminal. So first install Docker and then go from there. 3 more minutes. Let me also quickly do a poll. Were you able to get the DB running? Yes. No. Whoa. Only 30% yes. Install Docker, guys. I'll wait. It's fine. We can wait. I can just look at chat until then. Take your time. Get yourself a database. Please show Docker command. Yes, the Docker command is in slides. So just go to projects.100xdev.com. Go to the 4th slide over here and copy this command over. This is the Docker command. What if we create a gform clone where every gform needs custom rows? You would use a NoSQL database, or no, you can. Yeah, good question, right? Fucking great question. How would you use an SQL database if your application is this complex? A user can have multiple in a form, have different fields. The answer is user question fields will be a SQL table. कि हाँ भाई, user has created form underscore ID. Question underscore ID. Question will be title, and then options, or option 1, option 2, like this. Or Harkirat, what if it has multiple options? So this question can keep on getting expanded. The answer is ki haan, if a user can put multiple questions who have different, what is the question exactly? Create a gform where every gform needs custom rows. Every Google form needs custom rows. What does that mean? I think this question remains the same. What if a user can create a question which has either 2 options or 3 options or 10 options? How would you create an SQL schema for that? So here you would have a table. The user has created. I mean, if you don't understand this is fine. You can always use SQL for it. It just gets very complex. For example, in your case, if a user can put a question in a Google form which can have 5 options or 10 options or 2 options, you will have another options table. Okay, this specific question, let's say there was a form ID 1. The first form has bunch of questions. Question ID 1 has the title, what is 2 plus 2? And the options will be a separate table. Something like this. Okay, you'll have 2 different tables, and then for every question there can be multiple entries for options. So I wouldn't do it this way though. If I have to create something like a Google form, I would use a NoSQL table. The same problem came here when, if you look at adbot100xdev.com, it's a very complex schema because every course can have various sub courses which can have a folder inside. This folder can have another folder inside, so on and so forth. You can keep going. So here also, storing it in a NoSQL database is much easier than SQL. You can still do it in SQL. I still did it in SQL here. But at some point I thought would have just been easier to use a NoSQL database. All right. Let's do the poll one more time, guys. Let's see how many people were able to get a database. And if you weren't, it is fine. You can follow along. Just try to write the commands. Okay, 50-50. We're at 50-50. We might have to proceed, unfortunately. But you can write the commands, and I can put in a Postgres database for you guys to do it in. but there is a good chance it doesn't work, and that is fine because too many people will be using it. Oh, Neon seems back up, by the way. So yeah, you guys can just use Neon as well. But let me create a fresh one that everyone else can use. Neon seems back up. So try to create a fresh one, or use this one, even though everyone will be using this one, so it'll still be a problem. But you guys can use this one if you want. I've posted it in chat. Yeah, take 2 more minutes. Try Neon Tech, might work. If not, then for now we will have to proceed. Just follow along, don't worry. After the class, get a database and then try all the commands yourself. 1 more minute and then we will proceed. Someone suggested use Superbase as well. Yeah, Superbase is another open source project that lets you, I think they let you get a Postgres database for free. So yeah, you can go here as well, but either way it's 303 or whatever, 733. So let's proceed. Assuming you got back a string that looked something like this from the Neon database from someplace else, let's look at this string and see what it means. We have seen a very similar string in MongoDB as well. This is what's called the connection string. It's basically a single very long string which has your username, password, host, and database. You can have them stored separately as well. Okay, my username for my database is this, password is this, host is this, and database is this. I'll share soon what database is, but basically on a single host you can run multiple, you can have multiple databases. So this is one way to represent that. The same you will see here. My username is 100xdevs. My password is hidden here. This is the host, or where this application is specifically hosted, and this is my database. Ignore $SSL mode required equal to require. This is how you will find most connection strings. Username, password you can configure, you can change if you want. In fact, you will see here somewhere there will be a key that says reset password. So if I click on reset password, the password will change. And this password is something you want to keep secure. If I'm being honest, everything you want to keep secure. You don't want this exposed on the internet for 100 reasons. For example, this is our production database. If I expose this password, you guys will basically able to get access to the database of app.100xdevs.com and see everything inside what's there. So something you want to keep secure. Once you have this connection string is when you can connect to it and start to play with it. So in the next slide also, we will have to install this. You don't have to install this because you don't need it. No one uses PSQL. Everyone uses we will directly talk to Postgres via our Node.js application. So you don't have to install this library. But if you do, you can visualize your database a little bit better. So pick and choose if you want to do it. The slide tells you using a library that lets you connect to the database and put data in. So you have the database now. How can you create a table there? How can you put data inside? PSQL is a CLI that lets you do it. PSQL is a terminal based front end to Postgres. It provides an interactive command line interface to Postgres SQL. With PSQL, you can type in queries interactively and issue them to Postgres and see the results. Basically, it's similar to Mongoose, but on the terminal. So on the terminal, it'll let you run some commands and connect to your database. You can install this if you want. It comes bundled with Postgres. So if you install Postgres natively on your machine, from here, if you download it, then in your terminal, you should get access to PSQL. Even if you don't have it, it's fine. I just want to show a few commands here. You shouldn't need PSQL for this tutorial at all. After the class, feel free to install it. If you have it, good. If not, that's fine. This is one way. The other way is PG, which is a Node.js library that lets you use it in your backend app to store data in Postgres. This is basically Mongoose for Postgres. It is a library that lets you issue commands from a Node application to a backend, to a database, specifically a Postgres database. This is what you have to worry about. This don't worry about. Even if you don't have PSQL, it's fine. I will just use it in a place or two. Most of the times we will be using this library. So this is something we do need installed. This comes as simple as npm install pg. Don't worry about this if you don't have it. Let's proceed. I will show you a few ways of how you can use PSQL. Try it after the class if you don't have it. All right. Cool. First step, what was it? If you remember 2 slides back, I told you running the database. We have done that using a library that lets you connect data and lets you put data inside. I showed you 2 libraries, PSQL or PG. Creating a table and defining its schema. This is the third step. This is the first time we will be writing some code. Creating a table and defining its schema. Before that, what are tables in SQL? A single database can have multiple tables inside. Think of them as collections in a MongoDB database. In your MongoDB database, if you remember, in our Paytm application, we had an accounts collection and a users collection. Similarly, here you have various tables. Okay, all the user data will be stored here. All the to-dos will be stored here. All the admin data will be stored here, so on and so forth. Based on your application, you create multiple such tables. Until now, we have databases that we can interact with. Next step is to define the schema. Basically, tell it, okay, bhai, this is what the shape of my data looks like. SQL, this thing that I've said again and again, SQL databases versus NoSQL databases. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It is effectively a language only that lets you describe how to talk to the database. Basically, a language to talk to an SQL database. The command or the code or the syntax to create a table there is this. So this is the first thing you have to do after you have created the table, the database, sorry. When you went to Neon Tech or when you started the database locally, you have this pink part. You have an empty database. Now you need to put some tables in there. So that's what you have to do next. You will need PSQL to do this though. Yeah. Okay. Might be good for you to have PSQL. Even if not, it's fine. It's fine. Don't install it now. But we will see how you can do the same thing using PG. For now, let me run this command on my machine and show you what happened. And then eventually we will do the same using PG. So you can use the PG library to, create the table. Don't worry, basically, if you don't have PSQL for now. Let's look at what this command is. It says create table users. And these are the properties. As you can see, this is a very strict schema. It says कि भाई user will have an ID, a username, an email, a password, and a created at. When was this user created? When did they sign up? Everything is defined very strictly. ID is serial. I'll come to what this means. It is the primary key of this table. Username is some text. That's what varchar means. It means variable characters. Maximum length of which can be 50. Should be unique for every row. Should not be null. Email, varchar, unique, not null. Password, varchar, doesn't have to be unique. 2 people can have the same password, not null. Created at, timestamp, bunch of other things. When this specific user was created. As your application grows, you will add more and more of these green tables here. You might also update tables. The command is pretty simple. It's like update table, add row, something, add column, something. There's some syntax to update the schema of a table. For now, we need to create a table. So this is the command that we need to run. You can run it using PSQL, but since most of you don't have PSQL, we will run it using PG. I'm not going to use PSQL on my side either, but PSQL is a nice way to interact with your database. For example, if I run this command, PSQL-h localhost-d Postgres-u Postgres, which basically means for the Postgres database with localhost running on my machine and Postgres being the user, because when I started it using Docker, this is the command that I ran, and this gives it a default database of Postgres, username of Postgres, and it's running locally. And the password that I gave it was my secret password. If I run this command, press enter and give it this same password, my secret password, or whatever you might have passed here, then I would have hoped it connected, but it didn't. Doesn't matter either way because, okay, it connected. There you go. And now I can basically run these commands. This is a shell that lets me talk to my database that is running locally on my machine. As you can see, I did not connect to my NeonDB database. Can I? Yes, I just have to put the host here, the database here, the username here. And when it asks me for the password, I need to put the password here. You don't have to do any of this, but this lets you interact. This is one another way to interact with your database, but I'm not going to use it. If you will run all of these queries using this PG library, ignore PSQL completely for now. But if you wanted to, it would have been another way to interact with the database. All right. We have this query to create a table. Is this self-explanatory, or should I go through all of these individual? What is the email field? What is the username field? What is varchar? What is not null? There are very detailed steps as to what each of these means. Maybe one thing I should share is what is serial over here. Serial basically means कि भाई a Postgres SQL specific data type for creating an auto increment integer. If you remember, in MongoDB, if you put some data in, it gives it a random ID. If I open MongoDB Compass, every entry that I put in for, let's say, a user, I gave it username, password, first name, last name. I never gave it an ID. ID was automatically generated. And similarly here, if you say serial, it means bhai, whenever a user is put, give it ID 1. Next user is put, give it ID 2, so on and so forth. So basically a way for you to tell, bhai, automatically generate an ID for this user, starting from 1 up to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so on and so forth. Primary key. This is an SQL specific concept. Okay? Whenever you are creating a table, you have to specify, okay, bhai, this is the primary key for it. This is the thing that will uniquely identify a user. You might say, Harkirat, even email is something that uniquely identifies a user. If I have a Paytm application, a user with a single phone number or a single email can only sign up once. You cannot use the same email on 2 accounts. Yes, you can have email as a primary key as well. You can have username as a primary key as well. Rule of thumb is you have ID as the primary key, because a user might want to change their username. A user might want to change their email as well. ID never changes. If a user signs up, you give them an ID. This is their ID until perpetuity. So ID is something you want as the primary key for users. Generally, any table you create, you usually have ID as the primary key. There are cases where you might want to, have a different primary key. Primary key can also be a combination of two things. Okay? The primary key for users is both username and email, which means a combination of these two needs to be unique. A person with email 1 and username 1 and another person with email 1, username 2 can coexist. So if you want, primary keys can be on multiple fields. Okay, username, email tuple should be unique, but usually 99.9% of the times, this will be your primary key, which is the ID. Whatever I said about tuples, feel free to ignore. Shall I proceed? Do we understand the create table command? I haven't run it yet. I still have only the red bit. I don't have the green users table on my database yet. You probably don't either. We need to run this command. Only when we run this command will the table actually be created, an empty table. But can we proceed? Do we understand the create table command? Okay, great. Next slide. Interacting with the database. Now, once you have created a database, there are basically one of 4 queries you will usually run. Either insert data in the database, or update, or delete, or select. These are the 4 things you do, which are known as CRUD: create, read, update, or delete. To insert data, this is the syntax in SQL to do it. Okay, insert into users, username, email, password is this thing, and this thing. This is the syntax that unfortunately you need to learn if you want to become an SQL master, if you want to, be the SQL engineer in the team. Thankfully, today we have ORMs. So just how Mongoose gave you a lot of abstraction, Prisma gives you a lot of abstraction. So you don't need to learn all of this. But if you were writing this code back in the day when ORMs weren't a thing, or if you want to directly interact with the database without using Node.js, then you will need to learn these commands specifically. They're not too difficult, or you can also always Google how to insert, how to update. For example, update users table, set password equal to this new password, where email is equal to this, or where ID equal to this, or you can have multiple conditions here. delete from users where ID equal to 1. If you want to delete a user, let's say they want to destroy their project, you can do this. You don't really delete users in the real world. Whenever someone says delete something, you actually create a new row which is called is hidden, and you mark it as true or is deleted. You don't actually usually delete data for auditability purposes. You want it to still be there unless there are some compliance. Never mind, let me not go there. High level, this is how you delete data. This is how you select data. Okay, how can you get some rows from your users table? This is enough to create any application, right? If you have a to-do application, this is how you can insert a to-do. This is how you can get back a to-dos. If you want to update a to-do and mark it as done, you will run this command. So these are the 4 popular commands to run. Again, I'm not running any of these right now because I don't have PSQL, or like you guys don't have PSQL, so I'm not going to run PSQL. But we will use the PG library to run all 4 of these next, create a simple application. But do we understand this also? Straightforward. Let me create a quick poll. You don't need to learn the syntax of this just yet, or sometimes even at all. But this is the simple syntax for now. Even I don't remember this. I will always remember a bit and update users, have some typo in there, and then quickly Google and understand, or ChatGPT today to understand what the actual syntax was. All right, cool. So I showed you the queries. I showed you how to run them from PSQL if you want. So if you were using PSQL, you could simply write over here, create table, whatever query we ran, or insert. Just run the query here. It will put it in the database. But is this how a real full stack application works? No. A real full stack application will put this data through a Node.js application. In the end, Postgres exposes a protocol that someone needs to talk to be able to send those commands, update, delete, to the database. PSQL is one such library. To do the same in Node.js, you can use many Postgres clients. The most famous one is PG. So if you look at this PG library, it says non-blocking Postgres client for Node.js, pure JavaScript and optional libpq bindings. Non-blocking basically means, if you have an insert, it will not block the thread. The thread will do some other things till the insert actually happens. Pure JavaScript and optional native libpq bindings basically means libpq is a library that is probably written in C, C++, Java, some language that lets you, that the Postgres people have created. You should use this to connect to Postgres. Node Postgres, this library can either use libpq under the hood if you want, or it has a pure JavaScript implementation of the Postgres protocol as well. So you can decide which one you want to do. Either ways, irrespective of whether you use this or use this, your Node.js API looks the same. The function that you have to write in Node.js looks the same. The code that you have to write in Node.js looks the same. To kick things off, we need to understand the syntax of this library. So let's maybe start a Node.js project now. Create an empty Node.js project. And if you've done TypeScript, which I hope you have, let's bootstrap it using the standard TypeScript things you have to do when you initialize a TypeScript project. This is a basic of how the code will look like eventually. We will import this thing called the client from PG. We will initialize it using our credentials for the database. And then we'll call client.connect, similar to mongoose.connect if you might remember. And then this is how you can send a query to it. Client.query, send the query to it. Here we will first send the create table query. And then, the table will be created, and then we'll send all the select, insert, all those sorts of queries. So let's go to the next slide and create a simple Node.js application. There are a few steps there. Sorry, here I would urge you to follow all of them from the top to the bottom. And so you have a basic Node.js app bootstrapped locally. Let me do the same. These are the steps. Step 1, initialize an empty TypeScript project. Let me create a project here, call it week 10. npm init-y. Feel free to copy as well. This should create a package.json. And then npx tsc-init or tsc-init based on how you installed it should give you a tsconfig.json file. Open this project in Visual Studio Code. Just run these two commands in a new folder, open it in Visual Studio Code. One more thing I've mentioned here is usually general practice is to change the root dir to /source and change the out dir to /dist. So your application is structured a little bit better. So all your source code, all your TypeScript files will be inside the source folder. Then run these two commands, npm install pg, npm install @types/pg. This second one, we will eventually come to what this means. But if you're using TypeScript, a lot of times libraries don't have their types in the native library, for example, pg. So there's an auxiliary library that you have to install. You don't have to do it for all of them, but some libraries, even Express and Mongoose, will expect you to run npm install @types/mongoose or @types/express. Run these two commands, and then we should be good to go. Of course, you should also create a source folder here, src, and inside the source folder put index.ts, where we will be writing all of our code. Do not put it in the root folder if in tsconfig you changed root dir to /src. If the root dir is changed to /src, make sure you do have a source folder which has index.ts. Going to wait for a minute and then we'll restart at 7:55. Yeah. Also launching a poll. Do you guys need a break? Yes. Okay. Yes, it is. We will take a break. 10-minute break, guys. Take a breather and mess people. Please feel free to go to mess. Everyone else just bootstrap the application if you want to run ahead. And we're already at step 9 of 11. So there's not too much left to do after this. But let's take a 10-minute break. We will start again at 8:05. Let me open chat. This also gives you time to get a database if you haven't already. All right, a lot of questions. npx tsc error. Try tsc-init. If that doesn't work, run npm install -g TypeScript and then run tsc-init, or go to Replit. Yeah, you can go to Replit also if you have NeonDB as your database. Yeah, then you can go to Replit and connect from there. If you have it locally, then Replit won't work. Can we have a mix of both? SQL and NoSQL, for example, in one project? Yeah, you can. People do it. I've also done it. Not the best practice. It won't impact performance. It's just really hard to keep track of two different databases. So you usually don't do that. Why your iPad shows Tuesday, Jan 9, 8:41 a.m. I don't know. 9:41 a.m. I have no idea. Show the code. What code? We haven't written any code until now, but all of it is here on project.100xapps.com. Any special reason why you chose MongoDB over MySQL for this class? Why you chose MongoDB over MySQL? You mean PostgreSQL over MySQL? Because everyone uses Postgres and not MySQL. I'm not being seen used at all. I don't know why. That's why. Is there any middle ground between NoSQL and SQL that accepts JavaScript like data format? What do you mean JavaScript like data format? And I don't know if there's a middle ground between both of them. Is database security same? Yeah, security is the same. Yeah, there's no difference. Depends on, you can have an insecure SQL database, you can have a secure MongoDB database. I wonder why every day YouTube seamlessly at a very large scale video streaming is the most expensive amongst all. I wonder why every day how YouTube works seamlessly at a very large scale and video streaming is the most expensive amongst all. it's actually a very easy problem to solve what they have done. You can, I mean, as in, because it's a solved problem. There's something called CDNs that take away the pain. There are, like, in India, companies that run live classes that have 3 lakh people in them. Why? Because, you know, a lot of this work is actually outsourced to something called CDNs. So you don't have to worry about scalability. Amazon does it for you, or Google probably does it in house. So they have solved this problem. Anyone can create it. Okay, let's say the data is not deleted, and then there is a web page that wants you to create a unique username. And I create a user with username X and I delete the user. Yeah, in this case, you would delete the user. Or, you know, username will not be unique. The combination of username is deleted field will be unique. That would also not work. Yeah, I mean, you put a good point. This actually, so this is hidden field makes sense for things like blog posts. So let's say this is this website. For example, this, if you go to projects.100xdevs.com, there are 4 tracks here, right? In the database, there are actually 5 tracks. If I show you the database, this uses Firebase, which is another sort of category of serverless databases. If you look here, this actually has 5 tracks. Firestore database. But one of those tracks I deleted or is hidden right now. So if you look at the tracks, there are 5 tracks. How many do you see on the website? You see 4. Why? Because one of them has hidden true or visible set to false. So for these cases, you know, when a user is creating YouTube, for example, is a good example here. Okay, someone creates a YouTube video and then deletes it. They probably still store it somewhere, is what I feel. I don't work at YouTube, I don't know, but this is how blog posts, user related data. If a user deletes their ID, then probably you don't. How can we apply OWASP security standard to an Express API? No idea. What does OWASP security standard mean? I'm sure there's a way to do it. I'm assuming it's you need to follow certain, like, you shouldn't have a certain set of vulnerabilities in your code base, which I'm sure Express has by default. If not, I'm sure there's an easy way to do it. I was asked what are portals in React, and I have no clue. Me neither. Portals in React. Portals are first class way to render children in DOM that exists outside the DOM hierarchy. Happy to I mean, no idea. Basically, I've never used them. Seems like a pet interview question or something. Happy to discuss it in an offline video. How do we answer that? Aware about CRUD operations of SQL and also with ORMs, but in interview or other advanced things should know as experienced developer, but not much needed in database. There are a bunch of things. So indexing is, you know, common thing to know in database, but not needed for a long time. Indexing, maybe there are, you know, various types of indexes you can put, B plus tree. There are different algorithms that you can choose. What algorithm to choose when are popular interview questions. You know, most probably won't have to worry about them at scale at like ever or for a long time, but they can ask. So, you know, these are standard database management questions. In app.100xdevs.com, why we use Discord integration? Is it for giving access to Discord? That was the case, but there is no, like, right now this just takes you to an invite link, which anyone can hit. So it's not really gated the way it was originally written, because a few people were, originally it was written in a way it's only gated if you have a purchase, which means only someone who has bought the course gets in, but right now anyone can get in. This is why you might see a lot of people on Discord, which is like a significantly higher number than, you know, the people who are in this call or who have bought the course, because this link you can basically share with anyone. If you go to this link, if I copy this over and, you know, send it on chat, you can send it to a friend, and then, you know, they can join without having access to the course. Originally it was written in a way that wasn't the case. Now it is the case. What are migrations in SQL? Great question. We will see it soon enough, but basically, you know, the create table command that we ran, or we usually run, or update table command that changes the schema as your application grows. These are called migrations. You store it in your source code. For example, if I go to, you know, dub.sh GitHub, you will see in there create. could have sworn there is a place here where all the migrations are present. Basically in your source code of your project, as your project grows, we'll have it on ours, right? We are open source now. So if you go to code100x/cms, you will see Prisma/migrations. This, if you look at them, all of these are as the application grew, as the database changed, all those create table commands, alter table commands are here. You know, as I grew, the application database changed. The schema updates are all present here. If you look at the very first one, it'll probably be, oh, this is not sorted by date, is it? It isn't, but all of these create table commands are here. These are called migrations. So when you clone this project locally, you run a command that runs all of these SQL on your database. That way, your database has the same schema that is required by this project. So that's what's called migrations. All right. Request. It's really helpful that you uploaded the previous cohort video topics that will be covered upcoming weeks. So please save for upcoming classes. Happy to do it. Not a lot of things from now that we are covering were covered in the last cohort, but if that's the case, I can do it. All right. 2 more minutes. Going to, oh, my screen sharing is paused, it seems. I don't know what happened. Screen share one more time. Let me write this down. Controller logic. A lot of people are like very interested about MVC. MVC is just a way to structure our applications. Happy to do it, which also like totally goes down the drain today because no one's doing front ends in a Node.js application. If you have an Express application, it never serves front ends anymore. It used to for the longest time. So the famous MVC architecture made a lot of sense when you did not have React. You used to serve both front end and back end from your Express application. Now that doesn't happen. So this architecture itself is pretty archaic. Controllers can still make sense. Basically means place where you route all your requests. Views make no sense now because your backend isn't serving front end anymore. And models, sure, it's just a different place. The place that we called the DB folder until now is what you would rename as the models folder. That's it. That's really the MVC architecture, but happy to discuss it more in a video. Let's kick things off. Let's write a function to create a users table in your database. Okay? That is all the context I will give. Some code of how you can already use the PG library is present here. So if you go to the 8th slide, how to do queries on a Node.js application, there is some code present here. You can use this code. Make sure you replace the credentials with your database credentials, and then send a query that lets you create a table, a simple users table, which we wrote a few slides back. All right. Let me do the same. That's not present here in slides. I'm happy to also just add the code. Let me write it quickly. Would urge you to write it yourself if you want. Oh, well, it wrote it for me. Again, the problem statement is write a function to create a users table in your database. The first thing you have to do is connect to your database and put the right credentials here. So if you were using NeonDB, then all of these will get replaced based on what you see on NeonDB. If you were not using NeonDB, if you're running it locally, which I was, then you will use the local credentials here. I think you can also send the connection string in here. There you go. So if you were using NeonDB, just paste the connection string here. Let me do that as well. So if I go to NeonDB, and if I select this table that I created, or sorry, this database that I created, show the password and copy it. I can send this over in chat as well if you want. Use this to at least connect to your Postgres database. We will see how you can actually create a table here. But to kick things off, use your NeonDB credentials here. If you were running it locally, then it will be something like this: Postgres : whatever your password was, which in my case was, my super secret password. And then host will be localhost, and table would be whatever table you want. I'm going to use the Postgres table. So if you ran it locally, this is your connection string. If you did not run it locally, paste it from NeonDB. Once you do, you have a client that's connected. Write a function called create users table, which will run the create table query here. Given you already know, okay, this is how you send a query to the Postgres database. Client.query, and here you need to put the create table query. What you can do is use this tilde, so you can have a multi-line query, create table users, or you can use double quotes and have it in a single line as well, create table users. This tilde is super helpful in JavaScript. It lets you write multi-line strings. It's present right next to 1 on your keyboard most probably. And if you use this tilde rather than using single quotes or double quotes, you can write multi-line strings. Here I have to paste the create tables query, which you can find from a few slides ago. This one right here. And then call it. One thing you should do is await on client.connect, because it takes some time for this Postgres client to actually connect, your Node.js application to actually connect to the database. Await on it first and then run this command. This is how you can create a table in your Node.js application, in your Postgres database. I'm going to paste this here as well on slide 8. So you can copy it from here if you want. There you go. Now if you go to slide 8, you should see the complete code that I've written locally. You can copy it. Just make sure you replace this with your own connection string and run this. Let me also go back to dark mode here. There is a bug on the website right now. All right. Hopefully this is clear. Hopefully this is straightforward. You can run this. Let me try to run it locally. What is the way to run a TypeScript project now? First, you have to build the project, tsc-b. Let me increase the size a bit. And then node dist/index.js. If I run it, it says result command created. Seems like it worked. Unsure if it did work. I don't see any errors here. Most probably the command did run and I have a table locally. It might not have run for you if you're using the shared database that I shared, because someone else might have run it. But how do I confirm that the table is created? Thankfully, I have PSQL. I can use that. If you don't have PSQL, if you don't see an error here, if you don't see an exception thrown here, then the table was created. If you see an exception, then the table wasn't created. Just to confirm that it was for me, I'm going to use PSQL, and then PSQL, you can run this command /dt to actually see your tables, which as you can see, I have a users table here. If you don't understand this part, it's fine. As long as this code works for you, that lets you create a table. Let's see how many people were able to do it. And then we can proceed. From here, it's just pretty simple stuff. Writing the inserts and the updates and the deletes. 50-50. All right. So were you not able to do it because you don't have a database access or you don't understand the code? I will repeat the question. Do you not understand what is happening here? It's fine if you don't have database, if you're not able to run the query in the database. But do you not understand the code only? Do you understand? Oh, fucking, I asked the wrong question. Didn't I? Do you understand the code? Yes or no is my question, I guess. Sorry guys. Do you understand the code 80%. So people who do, proceed to the next slide. There is a question on slide number 9, which is create a function that lets you insert data into a table, make it async, make sure client and connect is called. Don't look at this answer and try to write this yourself. For the people who faced an issue, can you paste the question? Oh, I'm using Neon, how to use PSQL. Replace everything here with the username, password, and database. You can find it, extract that from the connection string. Getting an error. A lot of people are getting an error. Self-signed certificate chain, TLS error. Cannot use import inside a module. Cannot. Mayank, you should use a TypeScript file and not a JavaScript file. Oh no, it is a TypeScript file. Module. Did you do an npx tsc dash dash init? Do you see a lot of people are seeing this. Cannot. No, Mayank here. Ran Postgres on Docker, hitting authentication error. Are you using the same password that you had here? My secret password. What did you forget to put in the password? Can you connect via PSQL to it? How to run this TS file? Great question. So if you remember from last class, you first have to compile the TS file, tsc-b. That will create dist/index.js, and then you can run node dist/index.js to actually run it. Now, as you can see, it gives me an error. It says relation users already exists. What is the way to run a TypeScript file? tsc-b or npx tsc-b to compile your index.ts file into an index.js file, and then node dist/index.js to actually run it. I'm getting this error. A lot of people are getting some self-signed certificate in chain. Can you post your connection string when you do that? Explain the connection string. Connection string is basically a single string which has all the credentials to your database, your username, your password, where the database is hosted, and the specific database that you are connecting to. This username, password, host, and database is what you give to PSQL also, is what you give here also. You can give the connection string, or you can give individually ki haan, by username was this, password was this, so on and so forth. That's what the connection string is. Where do you get it? You get it in NeonDB, or whenever you start it locally, you can construct it based on whatever your username, your password is. How to run index.js? Answered that. How to get password? I'm using Neon connection string. In Neon, this is your password, right? This is my username, harkira.itr. This is my password right here. Whatever you see after colon. If you press this eyes over here, it will reveal your password. Show the TS config. I had the standard TS config and I made some changes here. Module.js root dir source. If you want, I can paste this in chat as well. Oh, it's very big for chat. There we go. All right, given some time, let's see if people were able to run it now. Why has the ratio suddenly decreased? Okay, let me open chat here. What are you guys missing? Is there an error? Are you not able to start the database? I've opened chat. Permission defined, denied for schema public. You probably are not passing the right password. To get access to the TypeScript compiler TSC from the command line, either use Amalya Suhel, run npm install -g TypeScript. Maybe delete your node modules and add it again. Mayank Pratap, cannot use import outside a module. Try doing this, Mayank. Add module true here. Put this inside double quotes. Or module true. Client has already been connected. you probably are running client.connect twice, once outside and once inside. Only run it once. Hi, did it Docker via that long connection string of sort? And so now I don't know if the database is created or not. How to get the connection string? For Mongo, it's this. Just replace your password here and you're good to go. Whoever is seeing this is not the TypeScript command you're looking for. You have an error from the last class itself. Basically means you have not run any TypeScript project locally now. You can do one of two things. You can replace this with a JS file. So just rather than having a TS file here, have a JS file and do a require const client equal to require PG. So you can do this and just replace this with a JavaScript file and then run node.index.js. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, for people who are seeing TypeScript issues, just convert this to a JavaScript file, and on the top, rather than doing an import, do this const client equal to require PG, and then hopefully you're good to go. But generally would urge you to start to learn TypeScript. All right, last poll, guys. I think either way we will have to proceed after this. But let me do a poll, and especially if the TypeScript, it seems like a lot of people are facing issues with TypeScript. All right, good to go. And good, not great, still at 80%. But in the interest of time, let me proceed and then I will be here at the end of the class. Let me finish everything from the slides today. All right, the next thing we have to do is create a simple Node.js application that lets you put data. Basically create a function that lets you insert data. I'm going to copy the answer here and take you through it. There's only one extra thing to learn in this, which is SQL injection, which we'll come to very soon. Let me quickly explain the code that's written here. I've defined a function called insert data. So if you come back to the slides, it's fine. Happy to take doubts at the end. Let's do some extra important things from now on. So little bit of focus bring back. Insert data creates a client, calls client.connect, and then runs this raw SQL query. Insert into users, username, email, password, and these are the values. And then calls client.query on this insert query and says insertion success. If you try to run this, it will just work. If I run, now this is an index.js file. So if you are copying code, make sure you do a const this thing equal to require PG. For now, this is fine. You don't need to, have TypeScript, but eventually change it. If I run this command, it says row count 1, command insert. Row count 1 basically means one thing was inserted. If I actually query my database using PSQL, so if I go to here, run PSQL, and do a select star from users, you will see I have one user. So the insert worked correctly. This command is working fine. Insert into users. These are the values. These are the values. These are the column names. These are the values. But this is not the right syntax to use when you're using the PG library. This has a very important problem, which is this is insecure. When you expose this functionality eventually via HTTP, if you eventually create an HTTP server, how will this application eventually be created? Eventually, you will have an Express application where you will have this, command to actually put data in the database. And this Express application will take inputs from the user. The user will be like, my username is Harkirat and my password is 123456. This and this both come from the user. And whenever the user can give you input fields like this and your Express app receives it, you should not pass them as such to the database. They can give you some erroneous things in there and do something called as an SQL injection. What is it called? It's called an SQL injection because your end user from the browser hit your backend and give you some data that you, without checking or verifying it, directly send to the database. So they can actually update your SQL query a bit and, inject things that you don't want them to in the database, read your database, delete your database. So the way we have written code until now is actually incorrect. If you take this username as an input from the user, and let's say the user sends you, select delete from table users, and you put it as such over here, they can actually delete your data. I'm happy to fabricate an exact use case and show you how that happens. But this is a common attack in SQL. In fact, this attack happened very recently on one of these websites as well. It's a very basic thing that you probably should, not have in your backend. Okay, whatever strings that user is giving you, you put them as such in the SQL query. You should do something different. A more secure way to store data is update the code so you don't put user provided fields in the SQL string. I repeat, if this string, and this string were provided to you by the user, don't paste them as such in the SQL query. Rather do something else. Let me show you what that is. I hope you understand what are user provided strings and what is the SQL string. This is the final SQL string that you are creating. These are the user provided things. How do you update your code so that you don't put the user provided strings as such? It's using syntax like this. Look at the syntax. It's a little bit different now. It says the insert query is insert into users, username, email, password, values, $1, $2, $3. All the user provided strings are not put in the query as such. They are given as values separately. Okay, bhai, client.query. This is my query and these are the values. Don't treat these values as SQL commands. If you run the code this way, Postgres will understand that this is the query. This is where the SQL is written. These are just values. Versus if you do this, then Postgres will be like, acha, this is the whole SQL query. And if the user here puts something erroneous like, select star or delete star from users, that can actually run as an SQL query. It's very easy to do it. Just give one common thing you should try on a website if you're ever trying to hack it or, do SQL injection, is try something like this. Wherever they have input fields, here send : delete star from users : and click on login. If they have not done SQL injection the right way, this : delete star from users will reach where? It will reach here. And since it's part of the SQL query, SQL will feel that the query ended here. And then a new query started to delete all the users. Versus if you give them as values, then SQL will be like, acha. The value that the user wants to put inside is delete star from users. Versus if you put it as such in the string, it will be like, acha, the SQL query is insert into this is whatever, and then delete from users. So it will insert also, then it will delete all the users as well, which is why this is the right way to put data in your database. Whenever you have user provided values, you give them separately. You don't have them part of the SQL string. You have them separately as values. This is the syntax for it. Client.query. This is my SQL query. These are my values. Username is $1. Email is $2. Password is $3. These are the three values. Do we understand SQL injection? And there are 1,000 websites that you can try this on, by the way. You should also. And then report and make money. Okay, we don't understand SQL injection, seems. 85%, not bad. 86, great. Cool. Great. SQL injection, 86% understand, great. We understand inserts. From there, it's just how do you query data? Given that you have users in the table, how can you get them back? The answer is the query will change a bit. Select star from users where email equal to again $1, which is an input to this function. So if I copy this code and try to run it, let's go from top to bottom here. What have I done? I have number 1. Again, this is a JavaScript file, so I'll have to change code a bit. I've defined a function which takes an email as an input, connects to Postgres, and then runs what query? select star from users where email equal to $1, where the value email comes as an argument here, and then we run client.query, query values. This basically means something like this. Okay, this is the query, and the first argument that's being expected here is this. And then finally, we log them if there is an error, then we return null, or if we don't get back any rows, which means a user does not exist, then we log no user found. If we find a user, we log the first user that we find. Since the email is unique, you will only either find one user or find none. So, either you log a user here or nothing gets logged. And then there is a bunch of try catches, because throughout you will see, errors in when you connect to a database. If there is, if you're trying to insert a user who already exists, it'll throw an error. So it's a good idea to put it inside a try catch block. You don't have to. I've removed it for the simplicity of the code right now. So this is what the code looks like. You call get user with whatever email you want. I've called it here with user5@example.com. I don't think this is the user that exists in my table. So let me find a user that already exists. I have a user with this email, user3@example.com. So if I paste this here and run this specific JavaScript file, it says user found, ID1, username, email, password created at. All right. Is this clear? Is create clear and get clear? If these two are clear, then I'm assuming update is straightforward. But let me do a quick poll here just to make sure. Oh, 80%. I will take a pause. Let me see what the 80% can do. What's the next slide? You can't do much. Okay, let me take a quick pause here and open chat. Feel free to take a break for people who understand everything. What part seems confusing right now? Take a 8 to 10 minute break, guys. Okay, quick recap. I'll do the recap. Okay, explain get. What do you mean get? What is query email? Great question. I think the syntax that is confusing is this syntax right here. Ignore everything below, ignore everything above. Just focus on these three lines. Client.connect, await on it. Make sure that the connection has been made between you and the database. If this is your Node.js application, and this is your Postgres database, before you send a query here, first you have to make sure they are both connected, because my Node.js application is right now running here. My Postgres database is, let's say I'm using Neon, it's in the US. So it might take like 1 second for this connection to happen. So first call client.connect and await on it so that this connection is created. Once this connection is created, then send it various queries. Okay, by insert, delete, update. But when you are sending those queries, don't send them simply. Okay, by insert into users, username, password, whatever, and then harkirat@gmail.com. Don't put these as such in the SQL string. Rather, do this. Okay, bhai, select star from users where email equal to $1, not Harkirat. Can I write this? Can I do this syntax, Harkirat? Yes, you can do this syntax. Should you do it? No. Why? SQL injection. Whoever has sent you this email, they didn't necessarily send you harkirat@gmail.com there. They could have sent semicolon, delete from users. They could have sent you this. If they sent you this, what does the final query become? It becomes this. Select star from users where email equal to nothing, and then semicolon, delete star from users. You send 2 queries. The second one of them actually deletes all the users. So should you write code like this? No, you shouldn't write select star from users where email equal to this user provided email, which could be erroneous. Harkirat, I can add Zod validation here and make sure it is a valid email and not a string that looks like this. Yes, you can add that, but through some crevice, if you forget to add that, if there is a bug there, if this user provided value has something erroneous that causes an SQL injection, it'll blow up your database, right? So you should never take user provided values and put them as such. You should be like, bhai, email equal to $1, the first value, and here you can find the email from SQL. Even if yahan pe it looks like this, delete from users, SQL will be like, theek hai, this person's username is this. They don't want to run this SQL query. This is just a value. If you give it $1, SQL understands that this is the value, the first value in this array. Similarly, if I had a $2 here, SQL would understand that whatever the value is here, even if it is an SQL query, they want to put it in the database. They don't want to run it as a query, which is why we have used this dollars syntax versus directly doing, this. You can still do this. I'm not saying you cannot run this. This will still work, but this is insecure. This is secure. Now, are we good to go? Cool. Let's proceed to transactions and relationships. This is the advanced bit which came after 1.5 hours. I hope you guys still have the energy to go through this because this is important. So take a breather, bear with me for 20 more minutes, and then, happy to chat after this. Happy to take more questions. I know it's been a long class, but let's spend some time here on relationships and transactions. Sort of important. Relationships let you store data in different tables and relate it with each other. This is a very important use case needed in both MongoDB as well as in SQL. Let's look at first how relationships are stored in MongoDB. Since MongoDB is a NoSQL database, you can store any shape in there. If I ask you to store a user's data and their address, you can store it like this. Okay, name is this, email is this, and address is an object which has a street, city, country, pin code. Okay? You can store it like this. Can you do the same in SQL? No, you cannot. In SQL, you cannot have a row which has an object. A row can have a string, Boolean, numbers. It cannot have an object like this. So how would you create this relationship in SQL is a question. Since SQL cannot store objects as such, we need to define two different tables to store this data. Unfortunately, this is not the only way, but the most popular way, the right way to store schema like this in your table. Okay, bhai, there is a users table that looks like this, and there is an addresses table that looks like this. Harkirat, why not merge them? Why not be like ID, username, email, password, city, country, street, pin code? What if a user has two addresses? Will you have two entries in the users table? No, you cannot have that, which is why you have to keep them separate. Users table will have a unique entry for a single user. Addresses table can have multiple addresses for the same user. A single user can have 3 addresses, 5 addresses, right? So for that reason, you break them down into two different tables and you relate them. What do I mean by relation? I mean, okay, by here, if I say the user ID 2's name is Raman and this is their email and this is their password, here I can say address, this city, this country, this street, this pin code belongs to this user. User with ID 2 is a foreign key to this user's table. Any entry that you see here, the user ID over here will be a foreign key to a table here. So here I have introduced a new term called the foreign key. Basically represents if there is a table that is related to a different table. What are we discussing? Relationships. If a table is related to a different table, you can specify that user ID is a foreign key, which means you can only put anything in here if a corresponding user exists, which makes sense. Your addresses table shouldn't be allowed to have an address for a user that is an orphan, a user that doesn't exist. This should only allow an entry here if a user exists, which is why when you create the addresses table, you can specify that bhai, this user ID references this ID here. The user ID in this table will have at least one user in this users table with the same ID. So when you're creating the addresses table, this is what the syntax looks like. The users ka syntax is the same, but addresses ka syntax looks something like this. Okay, there is an ID. There is a user ID. Okay, who is this user jiska ye address hai? Who is this user whose address this is? city, country, street, pin code, and lastly, foreign key user ID references users table ka ID. Ignore this for now. This basically means what happens if a user gets deleted. If a user gets deleted, should you delete all the addresses for that user as well? Probably, right? If a user leaves your application and you delete them, should you delete all the entries here? Probably yes. So that's what this on delete cascade means. Ignore this for now. Everything else, this part I'm hoping is clear. This is the extra bit. Okay, bhai, addresses table references another table, specifically in this case, the users table. All right. And then once you've created these tables, SQL queries from here are simple. For example, if you want to insert the address of a user, insert into addresses, user ID, city, country, pin code. User one has this country, city, whatever. And then if you want to get the address for a user given an ID, you can do this. Select city from addresses where user ID equal to 1. Do we understand foreign keys? Do we understand how to create relationships? This will become super important when we create a to-do application, because we will have a to-dos table which will be related to the users table. To-dos table needs to have, every to-do will have a corresponding user, right? So this will become important there, but do we understand this for now? What are foreign keys and how do you create them? We'll see how you use them. Great. 90%, 88%. Good, not bad. Happy to come back. Few more minutes and then we will, I'll take doubts. But for the people who do understand this, so this is how you create it and this is how you can get it. Let's ignore transactions in SQL for now. Let's move on to the next slide and understand joins. This I'll happily cover in an offline video. This was just something extra that I added to the end of the class. Let's move on to the next slide and understand, given you have these relationships, how can you use joins to query data? This is important and also very confusing. As your application grows, you need to understand what are joins, why you need them, types of joins, popular interview question as well. So little more attention here. Given you have created a table like this, which has a foreign key to another table, how can you use joins to query data is what we'll discuss next. Defining a relationship is easy. What's hard is joining data from two tables together. What do I mean when I say joining data? I basically mean, okay, popular question might be, give me by question I mean a popular query you might have is, okay, by give me a user's detail and all of their addresses. I repeat, if I open Swiggy right now, it shows me my name. If I open Swiggy right now, it shows me a few things on a specific profiles page. My name, my whatever email, and then all of my addresses. Okay, this is your Punjab address, this is your Delhi address, so on and so forth. So there is a query that this did to the backend. Okay, bhai, give me this user's info plus all of their addresses. Very common query that you will see whenever data is related. Okay, you want both the things. Another example might be if you have a to-do application, a common query might be, okay, bhai, your application has your name up here and all of your to-dos here. So the query might be, okay, bhai, give me the information of this user plus give me all their to-dos. You want joined data, both the things basically. How do you grab those? The answer is using joins. Let's see a few ways to do it. Approach 1. If I ask you to fetch me users details and their addresses, how would you do it? You can either do this. Okay, by first I will run a query to get this user's information. Then I will run a query to get this user's addresses. This approach works. If I first create an addresses table, let me do it quickly. You don't have to, but let me show you if you were trying this locally. I will first copy this, go to my PSQL terminal and going to paste this. You don't have to do it. But if I do copy this and create it, if I run /dt next, it shows me two things. Okay, I have an addresses table and a users table. A common command to see all the tables that exists in PSQL is /dt. I have addresses, I have users. Now, if I ask you, give me user one's addresses also and their user information also, you can either do this. Okay, by one, I will get their information. Okay, find user where user ID equal to 1. And then I will run another SQL query, which will give me their address. 0 rows, there's no entry in the addresses table yet. Or the better way to do it is using joins. Let's see what this command looks like. The benefit that joins give you is that you can get both of these things in a single SQL query. I repeat, the benefits that joins give you is that you can run a single command to get data from two related tables. If you need a user's username and everything, as well as their address information, you can be like select u.id, u.username, u.email from users u. So from the users table, assuming users table is renamed to u, I want u.id, u.username, u.email. Join addresses on u.id equal to a.userid. Oh, too many things here. Let's breathe a bit and understand this better. This is sort of important and a slightly complex query, which is why I said joins are a little hard. To recap what are joins, when you have related data in two databases, just like we do here, two tables, addresses and users, if a query comes that wants data from both of them, you can either do this, which is the bad approach, run two separate queries, or you can run a single joined query. Okay, bhai, give me this user's details. Assuming users is renamed as u and addresses is renamed as a, select u.id, u.username, u.email, a.city, a.country, a.street, a.pin code. From users u, join on this. I know I went a little too fast, I feel. Let me go to the iPad here. I have table 1, users. I have table 2, address. What do I want the SQL query to do? Okay, bhai, give me this user ka name and all of their addresses in a single row. I want the final result from SQL looks something like this. User ID, name, pin code, street, country, so on and so forth. I want a single response from SQL. So I can tell SQL, okay, bhai, I don't want to run two separate queries. Join both of these tables. Join users and addresses on these constraints. If there is a user whose ID is equal to an address's user ID, join both of these together and under these specific conditions. For this specific user, give me the result from these joined tables, this joined result. Do we understand it? I feel like I was not able to explain this very well. Let's see. So do a quick poll. If you don't understand this, I think most people did not. Let's do a quick poll. Relaunch. I'll also run this query locally to show you what it looks like. 50-50, all right. Okay. Let's run this query locally. Let me open my terminal here on the right and let me put some data in. What users do I have right now? If I run select star from users, I see I have one user. What addresses do I have right now? Select star from addresses. I have no addresses right now. Let me insert a single address for this user. For this user, let me put an entry for an address. This is similar to me going to MongoDB Compass and adding some entries here. I'm just doing it through PSQL because there's no GUI that I have locally for Postgres. All right. I think I have already written this command somewhere. There you go. I have this insert query that I can run. Insert into addresses for user ID 1, New York, USA, some street, some pin code. If I run this, now I have some data in my addresses table. I have some data in my users table. Do we understand this much? I have put related data in two different databases. We do understand this. Great. What is the next thing I say? I say, oh, can I say, select user ID, username, user email, city, country, street and pin code. This from the addresses table, this from the users table, because users has been marked as U, addresses had been marked as A, and join both of these table on user.id equal to user a.user ID. If there is a user with ID 1 who has an entry here in the addresses, a user who has an entry here in the addresses table with user ID 1, merge them together, join them together, and give me the joint result where user ID equal to 1 for only one person. I can remove this last condition and then this will give me all the joins, but I only want it on a single user. If I run this command, it gives me a joint result. It sort of combines the data from both of them and says कि भाई username, email, city, country, street, pin code. This is what we wanted, right? I wanted both of them in a single command. Can I still do the first approach? Can I get them separately? Yes. Why is this better? We'll discuss very soon. But do we understand now how joining lets you grab data for related tables? We do. Great. So the question is, if you understand this bit, how joins work. I've written the same code in Node.js, by the way, so you can look at this if you want to later on. What is the benefit of using a join? Why not simply do two separate queries? What is the benefit of doing a single joint query? The answer is reduced latency. How would I do the same thing if I had to do the same thing without joins? I would first have to, this is my Node app and this is my SQL table. I first would send one query. It would say, okay, query is done. Then would send another query. It would say query is done. I would have had to send two separate get queries. You might say that you can send them concurrently. Sure, you can send them concurrently, but still you are sending two data. You're sending whatever headers you need to send along twice. You're increasing the amount of requests that you have to do with the backend. So it increases the latency, increases the amount of data you have to send. Another thing it does is something called transactional integrity. It might happen you send the first request and then the data changed before the second request. So, you will not get combined data, that you might get data that is changed a bit. And for that reason, it always makes sense to send a single joined query rather than sending two separate queries. All right, that's the benefit of doing a join. You only do it for data that is related to each other. That's pretty much it. There are various types of joins, which let's take a pause here, considering it's almost 2 hours and this isn't too difficult to understand, but at the same time, let me cover this in an offline video. Let me recap from the top what we have discussed today. We did a few things. All the slides are here. Would urge you to try it out after you have Postgres instance for yourself. And if you don't, TypeScript doesn't work, use JavaScript, it's fine. Number 1, we did NoSQL versus SQL. Number 2, we introduced and started a Postgres instance. We used neon.tech for it. Number 3, we understood what the connection string is. How can you get the username, password, and database name and connect to it. Number 4, I introduced PSQL. Most of you weren't able to connect using it. That's fine. Then we introduced the PG library that lets you create data, insert data, update data, remove data. These were the easy bits. Then we understood about relationships. More importantly, foreign keys and how they can restrict data that goes in, provided there is a user that already exists. The reason you need foreign keys is because you can add more integrity to your database. You can make sure there is no address that exists that is for a user that does not exist. And lastly, we understood joins a bit. I will cover this again in an offline video. And another thing I will cover here is the types of joins, which, you don't need to understand this for most cases, but sometimes this is helpful. Also a popular interview question. With that, that's it for today. Let me open chat now and answer a few questions. Seems like the class was overwhelming, so happy to take a few questions here. All right. And for the people who understood everything, feel free to drop off. That's all for today. Tomorrow we'll be discussing Prisma. There is already a video from cohort 1 posted. So you can look at that if it helps you warm up for tomorrow. All right, chat is open. A lot of questions. Let's go from the bottom here. We are using Mongoose to define a schema for specific structure or data types. Then why SQL? Great question. I answered the same question a while back. You might have this question. So this is actually present in one of the slides, but let me explain a bit again. This is your Node app. This is your Mongo database. Your user sends you something. You can have 100 restrictions here. You don't even need Mongoose. You can have a library that does not have strict schemas on the Node.js application. You can use Zod. You can do 10 different types of validations here, and make sure you never send any wrong schema here. But what if there's a Java application that can send it? Wahan pe you don't have validations. What if someone logs into MongoDB Compass and puts wrong data in there? The schema is not enforced at the database level. The schema is enforced at the Node.js level. On Node.js level, you've tried to protect it as much as possible. But that isn't the only place you can send data from, right? And also, this could have bugs. You could have a Zod validation that is not done the right way. So for that reason, it is always good for these things to be defined at the database level. And you can of course use Mongoose, which gives you the same thing at the Node.js level, but that's not as good as the validation being at the database level. Will we touch upon stored procedures also? Maybe in 1 to 100. Let me write that down. Materialized views, stored procedures. There are a few things that I have in my head, even though you don't use them for the longest time, but sure. We'll have a specific section on advanced databases then. Even indexing we'll probably cover there. How joins work with different and multiple table sizes? So yeah, that's a great question. Joins will become very expensive. So what is joins doing effectively? It's taking table 1, let's say 10,000 rows, table 2, let's say 20,000 rows, joining them. So for every row here, you're iterating 10,000 times. That's like A into B times you're iterating, right? So joins can get very expensive very quickly. And for that reason, when you're doing the join, you have to be very clear. Okay, you write the query in a way so that, you first find all the relevant rows here and then start to join them. If you have, that's a good question. If you have 10,000 rows here and you have 20,000 rows here, and let's say I tell you, okay, give me the joined result. Of course, the joined result will have, 10,000 into 20,000. If everything is related to everything here, it will have these many rows. Of course, that's not the case. If a single user here probably has 2 addresses, so that will just give it 20,000 rows. But there could be cases where, you have basically A into B number of rows that are returned. So over there, you should first filter out the rows that you need from here. Let's say you need 10 rows here, and then you can do 10 into 20,000. Good question. Joins can get very expensive very quickly. When that happens, you either resort to, not joining data, or you write your join in a way where you first extract the right things from the first table and then do a join. Make an offline video on this topic. I'll make it on joins. I don't know if I want to do Postgres a third time. There is a video from cohort 1. This is the second video. I'll do an advanced joins video. But we can do a poll. If you need the whole thing, it'll be a little too painful to do it the third time. How to properly use null values, because null can lead to expected errors if not handled correctly. Yes. Unfortunately, this is like a very big problem in JavaScript. Okay, null and undefined have caused. There's a video out there, I forgot the name, like $1 million problem or something like that, or $1 billion problem, which basically says, okay, because JavaScript has this concept of a null or an undefined, that has led to 1,000 issues. TypeScript takes a lot of them away. But high level, the answer to your question is there's nothing much you can do. You can enforce, okay, null values are not allowed in your database. For example, every user should have a username, should have an email, should have a password. We've already done that. But a few values will always be null, right? Phone number is a good example. Not every user of yours might share a phone number. So there you have to deal with nulls in your application logic and in the database. By the way, out of context, do you use Rectangle app for Mac? Makes your life easier to resize windows. Let me write that down. I'll forget this. Let me write it down here. Rectangle app. Rectangle app. All right. Do we need to learn the syntax? Good question. If you ask me to write an insert query, let's see how much of it I know without looking at anything. Insert into users. Forgot. Was it this? I will try my best to write it. I'm not faking here or anything. Oh, okay. Basically, even I don't know it very well. I know the structure a bit, but then at some point I'll have to Google password values 111. See, there is some error now. I don't know if it's let's see. Oh, this is probably just double quotes, I guess. Basically, even I don't know it very well. I wouldn't be too confident to write it myself. No one in an interview, you in your job are never going to write. Oh, there you go. So you're not going to write it without Googling it, so it's fine. Which one is better? Front end and back end hosted individually, back end serving the front end build individually. Unless, you're using something like Next, where the front end needs to talk to the back end on the server side. So yeah, if you're using Next, then they have to be together. If you're not using Next, or if you're not doing server side rendering, then they should be separate. Do we need to answer that? What the fuck? What is FK in join table? It's probably the foreign key, right? I don't know if I've used it somewhere. FK in joins. Repeat the question. What is FK in joins table? Don't know what FK in joins table is. How users table got marked as U and address as A? Yes, good question. In the query itself, I said, from users U, join addresses A. So here I gave, even if I don't give it, I think it is fine. Wait, it's just easier to write it like this than writing it a different way. I think I can simply do this as well. Okay, this will be so hard to write here. Basically, you can do this as well. I don't think you need to do this, where users, you can just use users and addresses basically all around. It's just easier to write it if you have this shorthand. But if you don't understand that it feels weird, you can do this as well. All right, where users not ID equal to 1. Let's see. Yeah, that works. So if you don't understand the A syntax, it's just an easier shorthand to write. If you use users mark as U, addresses mark as A, then you just use u.id rather than using users.id. If you don't understand it, this syntax works as well. I'm going to leave this in the slides as well so you can look at it. Let me just put it at the right place. Delete joins approach to, let me paste this here. All right, let's see if there are more questions. I mean, there are more questions, I know that. Oh, I wasn't sharing my screen, was I? Fuck. Oh my god. So I was basically saying this. Sorry, this was what I was saying. This works as well. Yeah, you don't have to write users space U addresses space A. You can just write this, which you just have to. It becomes very long, which is why you probably want to create a shorthand over here. That's all. So users U addresses A creates a shorthand, so you can do a u.id a.id. But this works as well if that feels confusing. All right, sorry about that. I wasn't sharing my screen. How users answer that. Why need a database to connect to database? Why need backend? Can't we do it without it? So we've discussed this before. You should not. Databases, the way they are written is ke bhai, whoever has access to the database has access to the whole thing. So if you don't have a backend layer in the middle, the person who has in the browser, and this is your database, can query your database completely. You're opening it to the world. You don't want that. You want your database to only be open to a Node.js application, whatever backend application that restricts access based on who the user is. That is why you shouldn't do it. Can you do it? Yes. Firebase is a classic example of this, which where you use you let the user directly connect to the database, which is why it's slightly insecure. It lets you do security a certain way. Long story, happy to dive into it, but Most applications, you will have a backend layer in the middle that knows your database credentials. Your browser will never know your database credentials, which is why you never do it that way. Joins concept is okay, but syntax is bugging. Yeah. So the good thing there is also tomorrow when we learn Prisma, you'll see how easy Prisma abstracts all of that away from you. What is PL/SQL? What is PL/SQL? I have no idea. ORM means क्या होता है full form? ORM full form. Object Relational Model, I think. Full form. Object Relation Mapping. Buzzword. Basically means object relation mapping basically means you get an access to an object that you can call .save on, and that actually saves it to your database. We'll discuss it tomorrow. Please don't say let's not go there while explaining. We enjoy listening to real world examples. Okay, kya thi wo cheez that I did not say I go there? What was it? I remember I said this once today, totally forgot. If you can remind me what that was, I will share what that was. Could you please explain the syntax twice for new topics in live classes and give relevant examples while teaching? We'll do that. Why did you give user ID as 1? Because it is a number while defining the schema. That is a good point. And let's see. Firstly, was it a number? Let's see. Creating a, where did we create the table? There you go, creating a table. Users ID serial primary key. Serial primary key. Is it a number? I think it is. Let's see. How do you see the type? Before that, let me just see if this works. Yeah, there you go. You don't have to give it as a string. You can give it as a number. It understands it, casts it down to a string. Oh, sorry. I'm sharing my screen. I'm sharing my screen, right? Yeah. So you can just give it as a number if you want. That will work as well. If you give it as a string, it just casts it down. Chat. Can you explain how Docker locally and how to get connection string? So firstly, how to run Docker locally, I have a YouTube video which discusses Docker very well. And there I show you how you can run Mongo locally, not Postgres. And once you know that, you should be able to at least understand how to start Postgres locally. How to get connection string is if you run it by default like this, if the way I ran it, which was, Docker run this, then the default database that is created, the default username that is created is all Postgres. Just the password, since I have passed it in like this, is something else. If I don't pass this, I think the default password will also be Postgres. You can pass the username here, you can pass the password here, you can pass host will be localhost only. Once you've started your Docker, the way I created the connection string was, I know connection string looks a certain way. Postgres : the username, which I know for my Docker container that was created. If you don't specify it, by default it's Postgres : the password. I know the password that I had written or given as an environment variable was my secret password. So I posted my secret password here. @ I know it's running on localhost / what is the default database that is created? Postgres. So that is how I created the connection string given I started it locally, because all the default username and everything is Postgres. Can you change it? Yes, you can. If you pass in a Postgres username here or some environment variable, that will let you change the username as well. But since I picked the default value, I wrote Postgres here. The dark mode bug is fixed in daily code repo now. Is it? I remember merging it, but I don't see it fixed. If I refresh, it gives me a white. Even though I'm in dark mode, my system is in dark mode, I see this in white. Burns my eyes. How a user's table got... Okay, answered that. AST condition not understand in JS. What is AST condition? What do you mean by... This was the join. What do you mean? Oh, you mean this condition? Okay, whenever you say join addresses, you can, or join tables, you can join two tables that don't have a explicit foreign key relationship. I repeat, even if addresses I did not mark, oh, my internet is unstable, is it? Probably is. Let me look at Q&A, but Zoom is warning me. It is. Seems like it isn't. So, another thing. yeah, whenever you join tables, it's not necessary you join them on, a foreign key relation. You can join them on a random thing as well. Okay, bhai, even if I did not mark this as a foreign key to this, I could still do a join, which is why you have to give it a condition. It will not understand by default you want to join them on the foreign key or on some specific conditions. You can have multiple conditions there. Jahan pe bhai user ID here is user ID here and city over here is some city ID somewhere else. So, this condition is necessary for you to tell SQL ke bhai you join the tables like this. Two people said offline video. Let's do a poll after this class. Just a suggestion that Supabase is an online terminal for online SQL terminal that would be great for folks. So try Supabase, guys, if it's helpful. Now that we have a smaller crew here, tell me this. Now a few people have said, make an offline video. Do you think, and give a very honest answer, it will be helpful if, if there are 11 pages here. If there was rather than having a video on the website, there was a video over here that explained this specific part. Okay, if there is a small 5-minute video that explains what databases is, if you understand, go to the next slide and then another 5-minute video here. Is this approach better than a single very long offline video? Yes or no? Is this approach better of having multiple videos directly here on projects.100x.com? Yes or no? Oh, mixed opinions. Very surprised. I thought it would have been a very solid yes, but chalo. If you want to give me feedback on this, feel free to stick around till the end. Let me answer more questions. Can I use the insert query to put data in my users in one index.ts file like MongoDB? In my users, all in a single index.ts file like MongoDB. Also, more project assignments on TypeScript, please. Let's do a project for the can I use an insert query and put data in my users all in a single index.ts file? You can put whatever you want in a single index.ts file. You don't have to break it down into files if that's your question. I don't think I understand your question very well. And projects, yes, I'll try to bring some projects. Can you explain the step-by-step process to deploy a backend and also open source it by abstracting the essential information like MongoDB URL? Yes. So we have these projects that we've open sourced, right? So yahan pe basically they follow that practice, right? There, if you go to .env.example, you will see there's a database URL that's empty here, but in production it's something else. So how does that happen? How did I open source this without, sharing my database credentials? We will get to it eventually. You all should understand these two very well because these are, the right way to build repositories today and everything. So this and this you need to understand well. And this has answers all your questions basically. Doesn't deploy backend automatically yet. This does. This doesn't. So but high level, we'll get to it. Can't I use insert query and put data in my users in one index.ts file like Mongo? I don't understand the question. Can we use Prisma instead of PG? Yeah, we'll discuss Prisma tomorrow. Are we using Mongoose to define a schema for specifics? Answer that. Offline video guide on installing Postgres. Installing is a bit complex. Okay, let me ask someone from the team to do it because too many operating systems, every operating system has its own way. So happy to do it, but probably someone else will take that video. Why need backend server to connect to database? Okay, answer that. Is TypeScript done? Yes, it was done last week. How user table got marked as okay, answer that. Cohort 1 class was useful. Oh, well, you're welcome. How will join work if the user had more than one address in the same query? Great question. This is something I should have discussed. And I'll probably discuss when I discuss inner joins. But basically, let's say a user has 2 addresses. Let me insert another address for this user and then another address for this user. Now this user has 3 addresses. Now if you look at the join query, it returns you 3 rows. Okay, bhai, this username has this email, has this address, has this address, has this address. So I'll share. You might ask, why do you need this? You are having redundant data in 3 rows. Yes. So this is where inner joins, the thing that I mean, not exactly this is where, but the whole point of if you have multiple rows in a different table, how do they get related and where inner joins, left join, right join come in is what we'll discuss in the offline video. But high level, yes, this is what you will get back if you have multiple rows. Is there a way we can run a TS build like NodeMon? So we don't have to create a build again and again. Yeah, you can watch TSC like you can watch a TypeScript file as well. I think Node 1 will just work. You don't have, I could be wrong, but like I'm sure there's a Node 1 version of TypeScript if that's not the case. Under the hood, it still has to compile TypeScript, so it'll still take the same time. So it's not like it'll be any faster, but yeah, you have to run those commands yourself. Do we, no, we don't need to learn the syntax. Does this join similar to aggregation in MongoDB? No, I doubt it. Aggregation in MongoDB. Yeah, something completely else. Aggregation in MongoDB is more like a big data application of, if you have too much data, how do you process it? This is something else. How users table got marked as, okay, so that, can we have a DB visualization for Postgres? Yeah, there are many. Prisma gives you, the thing that we'll discuss tomorrow gives you this out of the box, but there are many, Postgres GUIs. GUI, I forgot the name. PG admin, yeah, there you go. This is one that lets you do the same thing. How data will be shown if there are answers that. How about using Zor validation at place where email is being inserted? Yeah, you can. I'm not saying you cannot, but still, SQL injection, if your question is in context of that, needs to, prevent, like what if it slips through? It might not. I'm not saying you cannot have the best backend, but still you need to be, probably don't want end user strings to be part of the SQL string. Can you please explain how to start? Okay, that Postgres queries look same as queries used in MySQL, and why Postgres is used? Why not MySQL? What is the difference? So SQL is the language. Okay, bhai, this is how you can query a table that follows the SQL format. SQL. SQL is the language. Anyone can create a database that understands SQL. Postgres is one. MySQL is one. There might be others also. Pretty sure there are others. So now why is one better than the other is a whole question. Postgres is slightly more optimal, written by XYZ team, all that jazz. Postgres versus MySQL, you can always Google. I think Postgres is better as your application grows, something like that. So I don't have the exact answer to your question, but Postgres is what's used in most places. It's very easy to, not very easy, but like fairly easy to move from Postgres to MySQL. But like most open source projects use Postgres, so that's what I started with. You can also start a MySQL project. Most of these queries will just work out of the box for you. What is happening under the hood that checks in $1 that the query written for fetching data? Oh, it's just that SQL as a language itself says that, bhai, if I get a single string, insert into, users, values, whatever, 1, 2, 3, versus if you do insert into users, values, $1, $2, $3, and give the values separately, user 1. So you can run this sort of query directly here as well. I'm pretty sure you can do that. $1, $2, $3 query right here as well. So this is just something that SQL itself has exposed. You can give me queries like this, or you can give me queries like this. It's not something that the PG library is doing out of the box. It is something that Postgres itself exposes. 99% I'm sure that's true. And so, wahan pe, it is like, haan bhai, I don't care whatever is written here. I will not process it as SQL syntax. I will, whatever is given to me here, shove it in this value, insert it in this value. Versus here, it is like, how do I know, okay, whatever you gave me here. I mean, of course, if it's inside quotes, you have to very meticulously design the SQL injection. You cannot, if you give drop XYZ, it will not work. It is only in certain cases you can, do an SQL injection, which was cases like these. Okay, if the query was select star from users where user ID equal to the email that user has provided. So here, if the email looks something like this, single quote, colon, drop from, whatever, delete star from users where true, then the user was able to, just change the string that actually reached SQL. So it's less of an SQL issue, more of a Node.js issue here. Okay, how you're constructing the string lets the user convert the query into two queries, one of them which is like insecure. And this is just, if you use the syntax, doesn't matter what the user gave you, it gets shoved separately and is never processed as SQL syntax. It's just taken as a string and put inside, which is why this works. And this is secure and you cannot do injection here. All right. If we have multiple databases, will we use one of, I will create a assignment this week where, there will be a SQL injection. So you can, try it out and fix it. If we create multiple databases, will we use one backend service to connect to all of them? Or will we create one backend service for each database? You usually have a single database, unless you have some auxiliary service. Rarely have I seen, you have multiple databases for some whatever reason. Usually don't. But if you do, you probably have two different applications who are serving two different purposes. A lot of times you have multiple applications but the same database. So you'll rarely see multiple databases. Also, what if there are some transactions where the change in one database should affect the table in others? That is exactly why you don't have multiple databases, where you cannot do joins, or you can, but they're really hard to do joins across databases. So you shy away from having, unless it's a completely separate app. Paytm is one application. Let's say Paytm creates a new application called Book My Show, which or acquires Book My Show. Then of course Book My Show has a separate database. But they're completely disjoint applications. They don't need to join any data. But as your application, reaches a point where you have to join data, is where it becomes a problem. Can you show inserting using connection string from Neon or something? Sure. So it looks something like this. Connection string. And let me go to Neon. This is one of the tables that I have. Paste the connection string here. And I'm running a command. It will fail, of course, because I don't have a users table. But let me run this. Hold stores index.js. Oh, this might not work for me. My machine, for some reason, is unable to connect to Neon databases. I saw this yesterday as well when I was working on, some code here that was trying to connect to the production database. If I change this to my, mobile data from my phone, it'll work. But even if I try to connect to this connection string via PSQL, it just fails for me. But you have to paste the connection string here. How do I know? Because if I replace this with my local database, Postgres, localhost / Postgres, and here let me put my super secret password. If this works, then NeonDB will also work. No user found with a given email. So this is the syntax for it. Connection string : space, paste the connection string here. Even I currently am not able to connect directly to NeonDB databases for some reason. This is not something new. I've been saying this for 2-3 days. Most probably the Wi-Fi in this hotel. So don't be surprised if that happens. I'm assuming that doesn't happen for too many people. If that does happen for you, change your Wi-Fi to a hotspot and try it from there. Why didn't we take care of the SQL injection in MongoDB? So MongoDB, what are you doing an insert? You were doing user dot insert something. You were never creating a single string that was a query. It's called SQL injection for a reason. It only exists in SQL queries. You can only do it if you're sending a string as a query. Can you do SQL injection? MongoDB doesn't expect a very long string as a query. So there's no way for you to do it. It's called SQL injection. Doesn't make no SQL database. No point of an SQL injection. Should one use Postgres over MySQL? Yes. Don't ask me the reason though. It's just everyone uses it, so use it. I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but everyone uses it. And when to use SQL and NoSQL? NoSQL, when you have very complex applications. For example, as I was showing you, schema for this is very complicated because inside a single course you can have a folder which could have another folder which could have another folder which could have a file. You can go as deep as you want. When you have complex use cases like these, does not make too much sense to do what I have done, which is use SQL. You will see if you ever look at the code base of this website, the schema is very convoluted because I wanted to have SQL or Postgres, but the use case was so convoluted it might have just made sense to have SQL, which lets you store object. So I could have just stored folder in like an object. Explain get user. Okay, let's see. Do I have it here somewhere? I probably do. MySQL database, creating a table, interacting with the database. Isi mein hoga na? There you go. This is the select query. Select star, which means everything from users where ID is something. This will give you everything from the users table. So if I connect to my local Postgres, and run select star from users, it gives me all the users and every field of that user. But if I run select username, comma ID from users, it gives me just username and ID. So you can selectively select what you want from this user. You can also add conditions. ID equal to 1. So that's the gets. Please make offline video for today's topic. Let me do a poll, and if everyone wants it, we will do it. Or like a lot of people want it, we will do it. Not everyone. How users table got marked as okay, answer that. I have done DBMS course. This is pretty straightforward and some advanced assignments to practice TS. Sure, yes. Someone who's done, as I said in the beginning of this video, it's pretty straightforward stuff. In Google Sheet, VLOOKUP seems similar to joins, and backend they are running SQL queries. I don't know what Google Sheets does or is. We can also nest queries inside joins, right? We can nest queries inside joins. Yeah, you can do that. In SQL, whenever we need to store something in an array as a data to record, then we need to create a table for it. In SQL, whenever we need to store something in an array as data, then so you can store it as a string, right? And what is an array? You can stringify an array and store it as a string, but usually yes, you create a separate table where you store it. Can you please explain how to start Docker locally? Okay, we will do it very soon. It is part of 0 to 1, so either way we have to do it. At some point. How users table got answer that. Transactions I will cover in an offline video. Transactions and joins I will recover in an offline video. How users got answered that. Can I host a database locally on a computer using Docker and then connect it within the computer, and both the machines are on the same network or Wi-Fi? You can connect it through a Wi-Fi on a local Wi-Fi basically. Will data be lost when doing a migration? No, data is not lost. Migration only means you're changing the shape. You're not doing a drop of a table. You're not deleting the data. You're not running a delete query. You're running an alter query. Alter the table, add something here. But that's why it won't, affect the existing data. Okay, let's do one more round. When we have two tables, users and USR, then how are you shorthand u.id? Oh, I only have a single users and address. We have two tables. The reason I was able to use shorthand was it says select. Let's look at this one. So firstly, you don't have to use the shorthand. You can do this. This works. If you want to use the shorthand, you have to mention from users U, from addresses A. If I make this B, then everywhere I will use B.city. If I make this C, everywhere I will use C.city, so on and so forth. So you mention the shorthand here, which is why you can use it here. If you don't mention it here, as I haven't here, you can use users directly. You don't have to use the shorthand. The website has no dark mode issue, and you haven't used Oopsie Daisy. The website has no dark mode issue. If I click on this, if I go here and if I click on any path, it doesn't have a dark mode issue. I think, I know what it is. I know what the issue is. So if you go to the website, from here, this theme gets set as a variable, which is why when I go here, it understands it's a dark theme. It passes that down to Notion. But if I refresh directly, if I come directly to this page doesn't have the theme provider here in the app bar, which is why it doesn't know I have the dark theme, which is why it appears as fresh. So issue if someone wants to fix, since it was here and you are towards the end of the class, I'm not going to create the issue. If you want to fix it, $20 bounty, $25 bounty, whoever fixes this. If you this issue only occurs here, figure out how to fix it. First person who does it. I hope you get the issue, right? If you go directly here, even though I'm in dark mode, should have been in dark mode, this is all light. $25 bounty if anyone wants to take it. Code is out there. Do we have to worry about the syntax or Prisma will solve our issue? Prisma will solve our issue. Generally good to know the syntax, at least insert, create, update, delete. High level you should know, okay, this is how you do a projection. This is if I do a select star, it gives me everything. If I do a select some fields, it gives me smaller subset. That's all. Nested queries instead of joins. Are you saying we should do? That is something you can do, probably should do in some cases when you know the join is going to be very expensive. I should probably discuss nested. I don't know if we can I will discuss nested queries in an offline video, even though not use very often, especially if once you use to an ORM, you probably never, not probably, you never use them, but okay. How to install Docker in WSL? You will have to choose some class here and figure that out yourself, unfortunately, or just ask a TA if they are help. It's not their job to like hop on a call and help you out with this, if I'm being honest, but if some TA can help, basically try it. If you face any errors, post them in Discord and they'll help you out. Is it compulsory to put user's table name like the first lowercase s in MongoDB we use? Oh no, you can have them as capital letters. I think 99%. Yeah. Let's do a create. Yeah, pretty sure you can have it as a capital letter. Can we replace the join login with a subquery? Join logic with a subquery. Can you? You can. Yes, you can. Which is more optimal is a question that I'm thinking myself right now. But you can replace it with a subquery. How to handle SQL returns if SQL returns null? Identify edge cases. So that depends on the syntax of this PG library. For example, when I do a result, it returns your result or rows. If there is an error, it throws an exception. You handle it inside a try catch. And I'm sure if you're using TypeScript, it gives you some good types. These types will become even better once we reach Prisma. So yeah, your life will be much easier when we reach Prisma. But until we do, this will probably not give you the exact types unless if we're not passing in. We can pass in a generic here. I don't know if we can. Yeah, seems like we can. Can we? I don't know. Let's see. Huh. No, never mind. Probably there's probably a way to get good types here, which is I'm assuming what you want. But yeah, if basically at compile time, if you want to catch all of this, you need the library to be to give you very good types, which Prisma does. I'm unsure if PG does that. Or if you don't have good types, you have to catch them at runtime, then you just have to write really secure code. Yeah. How to run Postgres if Windows terminal? If you have Docker, first run Docker GUI application. After that, okay, someone posted some. Let me copy this and paste this in slides. Copy and let's go here. And I would also give a $10 bounty for this. Whoever posted this, thank you so much. This is super appreciated. MySQL creating a database using Docker on Windows. There you go. Thank you, sir. Off-topic question: how to audit a smart contract? Got an assignment where I need to create a smart contract, submit it on testnet and audit it. Smart contract created, deployment and testing is left. So this is very ad hoc. How do you test a backend application? There are standard things that can go wrong in a smart contract or in a backend application, so you should figure that out. What does a company do that's charges a lot of money for auditing? There are like 20 common hacks that they look for, and of course they just read through the code base, and it comes with a lot of experience. They have a lot of experience, so they can look at loopholes, but effectively you have some loophole in your backend, right? Or in your contract in this case. So there's no standard path to follow. There are standard things that can go wrong in a smart contract. Make sure you don't have those in your code base or in your Solidity contract, whatever you have. Other than that, it's just ad hoc, bro. Or eventually, if you have this, if this application is going to hold billions of dollars or whatever, if it seems like this is a organization that needs to do that, then you will anyways have to outsource the auditing to some firm which will do it. Will basically does the same thing. Looks for a lot of common attacks. I have attended an interview where they have asked questions on Java, C, C++. I am familiar with Python and JS. I feel like there is a requirement to learn some basic Java and C to clear these rounds. Please share your views about it. I mean, very company specific, but again, if your company is asking it, yeah, you'll have to learn the standard interview questions of C, C++, Java. How is the job market edge over Django REST in terms of, so in this market probably no one asks, the standard startup market, remote job market, no one's asking C++ internals, I feel. How converting textual data to numbers or vectors allow you to query them faster in vector data? Not query them faster, it's query similarly. Basically, if I write this string, Harkirat lives in India. Harkirat is from Chandigarh. Harkirat has been living in India, Chandigarh. All three of these if you convert them into vectors, let's say one very long vector, how this conversion happens is, don't worry about it. But let's say I was able to convert this into vectors. They're very similar. Versus if I write, the world is round. This is also sort of related because we're talking about Chandigarh, talking about world. If I write, Pac-Man is such a good game, this gets converted to, some very weird vector, which is not even close to what is being talked here, and here. This will probably be, 1, 2, 100, 100, 100. So there is some similarity between this and all three of these. There is no similarity between this and every one of these. So as you can see, this vector is far away from these vectors and these vectors and these vectors. What do I mean when I say far away? I mean the distance. How far are these two? Almost, how do you find the distance? Firstly, Euclidean distance, वो दूसरे वाला जो होता है, a minus b whole square, b minus c whole square का under root, whatever way you decide to find the distance between them. All of these are very close. All of these, and this is sort of close. This is far from it. What a vector database lets you do is, it lets you store this string as well as its vector, and lets you ask, okay, what are the 5 closest vectors to this? That is what a vector database optimizes for. Okay, bhai, whenever an entry is coming in, someone can query, okay, what are the 3 closest vectors here? And it will say this and this. And then, you can get more information about Harkirat's location from that. Why will this be useful? Let's say you create an application where you dump all of this data, Harkirat's autobiography, and you store all of this in a database. And then Harkirat asks, what is my location? Then how will you search it through all of this? You can hit the vector database. Ke bhai, the question is, what is Harkirat's, where does Harkirat live? The vector for this will be, sort of close to, at least in my autobiography, the closest vectors that will come out are these 3. So you can take these 3 statements from the vector database, send it to an LLM. LLM will parse it and understand Harkirat lives in Chandigarh and tell you that. So that's what vector database let you do. Will the 0 to 1 end at February? Mid-March, I think. I mean, it's very convoluted now. Everything is 0, 1, 1 to 100 will get very convoluted. We'll let the people from 1 to 100 in from next month, and then we'll go from there. Can you replace join login with a subquery? Answer that yes. Do we have to worry about syntax? No. All right, good to go. Any more questions? All right. Surprisingly, no. Oh no, a few came. Sorry. Oh wow, a lot of them came. I'm not able to see GitHub assignments after week 6 on GitHub. Have we should assignments somewhere else? No, I don't think there have been any assignments. Have there been any assignments? No, we've just been building projects since. There are no weekly assignments. Happy to add them back. Yeah, they haven't been. You've not missed anything. Can we use OpenAI to create projects? Yeah, not when you're learning, but later on maybe. Normalization? You mean normalization? Happy to discuss it later. Well, it's too advanced of a DBMS concept to learn in this course, but we'll see. Is there any SQL injection VS Code? Probably, no idea, now that I've used it. I'm getting freelance work, e-commerce, humbly price them. Also, yeah, humbly price initially, eventually increase. Get them through Upwork so your Upwork goes up a bit so you can get more projects, or Fiverr, wherever. And where should I host them? Go with the free source for now. All right. Cool, guys. Let's call it here. People said it was long class. It was just 2.5 hours. Not too bad. I think most of our classes are that long. Cool. Let's call it. I will see you guys tomorrow and we'll do Prisma. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.